So in the last video, we talked about what can you photograph when there's really nothing to photograph, nothing going on. Where can you find something to shoot if you're starting to get twitchy, you haven't taken any photos for a while. And I thought, well, what if you went to a blues festival? And so that's what I did. I went to a jazz and blues festival, and the festival was on Friday and Saturday. It continued on the Sunday, but I was only there for the Friday and the Saturday. Now, the Friday, I photographed with a couple of rangefinder cameras. So the previous video is about using those rangefinder cameras. On the Saturday, I didn't take any rangefinders. I took my Nikon F3. So I want to talk about shooting with the F3, not really comparing it to the rangefinders, but it definitely was a total different experience. Now with the rangefinders, my longest lens was a 50. I shot with the 50, shot with the 35. Now with the SLR, I already had the experience from the day before, so I knew I didn't need the 35. And so I took a 50 1.4 Nikon, and I took the 85 1.4, I'll talk about that more in a minute, and I took a 135 2.8. So again, a nice little combo, one camera body. Yeah, there would be an advantage to having two camera bodies, but you'd have to carry them. So that's maybe not an advantage. Now the film I was shooting was Ilford HP5, and I think I shot 4 or 5 rolls of the HP5 on the Saturday. Now the venue was the same venue as the previous day, but the lighting was a little different, and we didn't have the direct sun. So the previous day on the Friday we had full sun, people wearing white shirts, standing in full sun in front of a black front of a black stage that was in the shade, so you had the crazy contrast. And then the second day it was overcast and the lighting was much easier to deal with. So I learned from some of the things that I picked up on the Friday, and one thing was metering. So I metered with a spot meter on the Saturday, and my exposures were much more consistent. So again, the exposure basically was a 500th at 2.8 with Ilford HP5 film. And I believe I would have been better off at 1,000th of a second and just opened up one more stop. Just could have froze it a little more. Now you have to remember, this isn't really an assignment. This is just for the joy of photography. This is just me, hey, I want to photograph something. I want to go out and take some pictures. In the past, you would have covered this type of a music festival for the newspaper, maybe for the festival themselves, but I was really just shooting the black and white pictures for myself. I did have to contribute some video, which I shot video, and I sent that in, and I didn't really have a big commitment there. And the rest of the time I was able to play around and shoot and experiment and make mistakes. And hey, I made a lot of them. Anyways, my name is Rob Skeoch. I worked for my entire career as a professional photographer. I shot the NFL for 14 years. I shot Major League Baseball for 17 years. Then I ended up being a national manager at Sony. I have a fair bit of experience with photography. Of my entire career, probably half of it was digital, and the first half was all film. I worked at 5 newspapers as a staff photographer over the years, shot a lot of film. And I've kind of gone back to film because that's what I love. Now, in the last video, I talked about checking out Jim Marshall's work. You should check out Jim Marshall's work. I'll put it in the link below, but I talked about that last week. The other thing I want to mention is the analog gallery. So the analog gallery, it's not analog in the sense of film only. It's analog in the sense of music. The analog gallery in Toronto is a photo gallery that sells concert shots, musicians, portraits of musicians. Now, if you're a photographer that over the years has gotten some great portraits of musicians and you're wondering, where would I have a gallery show? Where would they show this stuff? Or who could represent me? Now, a friend of mine, David Burnett, he did a series years and years ago on Bob Marley. And about 2 years ago, the Analog Gallery did a show of his Bob Marley stuff. So some historical, maybe contemporary, but if you've got a great collection of musicians in concert, portraits, behind the scene, and you're looking for an outlet, hey, I have no connection, I have no leads, I have no help, but the Analog Photo Gallery in Toronto, that's what they sell. They sell musician photographs. Are they looking for people? I don't know, but if you've got great work, they're always looking for you. Gold is gold. Now they're not looking for me. So I went to the local Jazz and Blues Festival, and I'm right up at the stage, trying to stay away from being in front of the speakers so I don't go deaf. And I started shooting with a 50mm lens. So the first band I shot was with the 50mm lens. And again, it's a very cluttered lens to use at these concerts. There's lots going on, there's lots of people on the stage, there's lots of stage structure. And I'm there in front of the stage with my 50 trying to get a good photo. Manual focus, focus on the eyes, or focus on the edge, the name on the glasses, whatever you can get. I was at 2.8 with a 1.4 lens. So the advantage of a 1.4 lens is not just that you could open it up to 1.4. It's easier to focus because it's focusing at 1.4. So that is an advantage. You don't have to buy a 1.4 lens, but there is an advantage to them. So these first couple of shots are, and these prints are all full frame, and I'll kind of talk about what I've done in the darkroom to get better prints, but they still need a crop. And in the end, I'll show you the crop. So the first shots are of this guy playing lead guitar. Now, it's interesting how he sings. I noticed this right away, and it was bugging me, so I thought I got to be a little more careful. I don't like how when he's singing, I just don't like how his face looks and his mouth looks when he's singing. So I tried to get something a little bit more expressive with him singing, just because I just didn't like the look of it. Again, I'm trying to keep the mic out of the face. That's a pet peeve that I have. I talked about that last video. And I'm trying to get, great peak moment of this musician. So the first one, this is just a straight print. And then I just burned in the edges, burned in the guitar a bit, tried to bring down the background so that it was a little bit darker and still retaining the tone in his face. So the exposure in the dark room is probably a 15-second exposure and another, I'm going to say 15 or 20-second burn around the edges to bring those tones down and just to bring your eye, keep it on the subject, which is the guy playing the guitar. So we started off with the 50, and I could see it was a little bit cluttered, so I switched to the 85. Now, this is the Nikon manual focus. It's an AIS 85 1.4. Do you need this lens? No, you don't need this lens. It's a nice lens though. Now I'm shooting at 2.8, so I could have gotten away with an 85 f2, which would have been half the weight, half the size, half the price, just as sharp. But I have the 85 1.4. It would be the only lens I would buy for Nikon where I would have two lenses of the same focal length. This is the 85 1.4. It's great, but it's big and heavy and expensive. And the 85 f2 would have done the trick just as well, and it's lighter and cheaper and uses the same filters as all my other Nikon lenses. So this 85 is wonderful. I wish I'd have had one years ago when I was shooting for the papers daily. Now I can finally afford this stuff. Back then we just couldn't afford the good stuff. Anyways, this 85 1.4, worth considering, but the 85 f2 also worth considering, and half the price. Anyways, I switched from the 50 to the 85. It gives you a narrower angle of view, so I've cut out some of the clutter. Again, keeping the exposure on the face. I'm using a spot meter on the face. Now, a lot of cameras, not this one, a lot of cameras have a built-in spot meter. My video cameras, when I did the video for the video part of this, I put it on the spot meter right on the guy's face, and that was what I based the exposure on. Many cameras have built-in spot meters. It's been around, like Olympus, remember the OM4 and all those, they all had spot metering. Nikon had spot metering too. Say the F4 had spot metering. It had matrix metering, which kind of started off with the Nikon FA. Same time as the F3, but had better metering. But the F3 has center weighted metering, which is great, very simplistic, not sophisticated like the metering that we have now. So I went with a spot meter on the face, and the exposure on the face in the darkroom, so exposed it with a spot meter, processed the film. The faces are exposed very consistently throughout the 4 rolls using that spot meter on the face. So If you have it, it was great. If you don't have one, use whatever you got. So anyways, switching to the 85, I've narrowed the angle of view. I've cleaned up some of the clutter. I still have to burn and dodge in the darkroom. So I want to talk just for a second about some of these dodging tools. If you've printed in the darkroom, you know that this little flag, you hold it between the enlarger and the paper and it holds back exposure. This is a big circle. This would be, I'd never use this. It's too big. This one, I do use a little bit. I made these when I was in college, so say 40 years ago. This one I use a bit, and I sometimes use it on an angle to get really narrow burns in. Now, this is the one I use the most, and these are just like stuck on a old piece of wire, like a old clothes hanger, metal clothes hanger, little piece of cardboard. So this one I probably use the most, and you just kind of move it around. If you sort of see the exposure on the face, as you're projecting this down, you're just moving that around. Maybe if it's a 12-second exposure, you're dodging it for 2 seconds just to open it up a little bit. Now here's something that we learned in college that I never do. This is how you're supposed to do it though. Now this happens to be, I don't have any more of these fantastic state-of-the-art photo sticks that you can get off of a coat hanger. So this is a spotting brush, and at college they taught us that instead of using a cardboard like this where no light's going to get through, to use a number 4 magenta filter that you would use for contrast control in printing. So now when you're dodging, it doesn't go as flat. However, it doesn't eliminate as much of the light. When you're dodging with this, you take out 2 seconds, it's taken 2 seconds out. You dodge with this, if you take out 2 seconds, it's still probably half the light is getting through, so now you have to take out 4 seconds. And the other thing is, this has to be clean and kind of optical because the image is going through it. With this, it's just blocking light. With this, the light is transferring through it, and so it has to be clean, not smudgy, because it is gonna, affect the image sharpness. Anyways, this, I hardly ever use it. I could say I never use it, but this was what we learned in college as the proper way to dodge. So you take a piece of magenta filter, just like you would put in an enlarger to change the contrast, and you make different shapes, and you do it with the magenta filter, because I'm always using multigrade or polycontrast, whatever you want to call it, paper. So there is an advantage. It does, in theory, make sense to use the magenta filter. I don't use it that often, but these are the tools that I keep in the darkroom for dodging. Now burning, a lot of people use a cardboard with a hole in it. I've done that, but I just use my hands. So it's greatly inconsistent. Every print is unique, but I just burn with my hands, and I burn every print. Every print would need burning, and almost every print would need some dodging. And burning mostly is the edges, to try to bring the edges down. Keep the subject a little bit lighter so that your eye kind of goes to the subject. I burn down the corners basically all the time. Now a different musician, again, I'm right at the edge of the stage with the 50. I'm trying to get it with the 50, but it's just a lot of clutter and a lot of noise. And again, I've burned that dodge. I've dodged his face a little bit, and I've burned down the corners. You can see it mostly on the edges of the photos. Now, the next place I want to go to, it's a different band, a different venue. So as I had said last week, there were 3 main stages. I kind of was working 2 of them. One was a paid venue. Probably mostly because there was a beer garden there, but the better bands were kind of there as well. There's the one stage on the street that was free, open to everybody. If you want to go take photos, you could go and take photos. It's free. Hey, what a great thing to take photos of. It's free. Go to your local blues and jazz festival. Now the paid stage had the better acts, and these pictures were from the paid stage. So this was like a guest performer. I just want to give you a brief idea of what it looked like here in the video. So this was a guest performer. You can kind of get a layout here of what the stage was looking like and how much movement he's doing. He's got that bright yellow guitar. But anyways, metering with a spot meter off his face, and he's playing away, and he knows I'm there. I'm right in front of him, and there's not a lot of other photographers. So he's gesturing to me a little bit, and we're hamming it up a little bit. all part of the game. But anyways, so these are with the 85mm lens. I'm quite close. I'm framing it as best I could. I've moved more center, not to the side. On the side, you had so much distraction. You had structures holding the stage up. You had the light where the stage ended. Now you've got the crowd. And if you moved around to the front and you could kind of handle the loudness of the speakers, then you could shoot right back against the back of the stage. The back of the stage is black. It's in the shade. He's closer to the light. Again, there's no direct sunlight, but closer to the light. So there's more exposure on him. And so the background goes black. Trying to get him without the mic in his face, trying to get, you know, a key moment in the playing, and trying to, work all of these things as best you can. Well, this guy was part of that same group, and he was the lead singer and also played the harmonica. Again, just a brief idea of what the whole stage looked like. So I'm trying to get something with him playing the harmonica. There's a lot of black space that you need to crop out. So, I'm around the front of the stage a bit. You've got those lights in the background. You're never going to burn those in. Those are blocked up, basically. So you've got the exposure is correct on his face. Then you're going to burn it a little bit. You're going to burn, there's some people on the far right corner in the bottom right. You're going to burn them in, and you're going to burn everything around him in. Just as your enlarger is projecting down, you're going to burn everything around the lead singer a little bit with both hands. Maybe a little bit of a dodge if it's a 12-second exposure, 2 seconds off on the face just to lighten it up a little bit, and then let it go black. There's a lot of black in the photo, but it's a black stage in the shade. Now, as we kind of continue on, different bands are rolling through. And this was my favorite band. This was my favorite player. So this was the lead singer and the lead guitar. A great player. Gives you an idea of what was happening on the stage. A light colored shirt. Yesterday, if on the Friday, the sun would have been beaten in on him, direct sun, it would have had super contrast. But today, the second day was a little bit overcast, so I was able to hold the details so much better. This is with the 85mm lens. Now, there's a couple of things I want you to notice on this. First off, there's another player in the background. So you can't get rid of them. These guys aren't moving around that much. He is coming up as the singer to the mic, singing, and then when he's really playing, he's dropping back a bit, which kind of layers him with the guy in the background playing the bass guitar. But I don't have the mic in his face, so I kind of like it. And this guy was a great player, so that was part of the excitement with him. Again, a little bit of a dodge on the face. Maybe it's a 12-second exposure. Maybe it's a 15-second exposure, something in there. Take 2 seconds off the face, and then burn in the edges, burn in the bottom of the guitar a bit. Just kind of burn in those, those structures up in the roof, and just bring it all down so it doesn't, distract from the guy playing. And again, with the 85, it's a great lens because it's focus at 1.4. So you can really focus it easily, and I'll kind of talk about that more in a second. So again, same player. Now you'll notice in the background, way in the background, there's a dot of light just above the edge of the guitar. In reality, that was like a hole, a pinhole, maybe the size of a quarter in the stage, and direct light came through there, and you could not, you could Photoshop it out now, but in the darkroom, it's very difficult to bring that little highlight, specular highlight, bokeh ring, it's hard to bring that down. So anyways, something to watch for. If you can, there's all these things going on, you have to kind of be paying attention. What is going to be out of focus? Now, people talk about bokeh in lenses, the bokeh, the bokeh, however you want to say it. Everybody seems to say it their own way. And when I was at Sony, we talked about the bokeh. Oh, this lens had fantastic bokeh. And you'd give lectures and talks, and people say, well, what is bokeh? And I always explain it like this. The better the lens, the better looking the out of focus areas are. So the more you pay for a lens, the better it is out of focus. And when you think about that, you think, well, isn't that just ridiculous? Anyways, people love the bokeh, however you want to say it. And it's the out of focus area. And that conversation never existed until I started at Sony. I mean, I shot for 40 years and no one was concerned about the out of focus areas of your photos. After it got reproduced in a magazine, like all that bokeh fell apart anyways. You couldn't, I mean, it was irrelevant. Cheap lens, good lens, didn't matter. Now everyone's excited about it. Oh, look at these out of focus circles. Wow, that must be a great lens. Yeah, it's out of focus. It's the out of focus area. Let's not get too hung up on it. Anyways, let's get back to the story. So shooting with the 85, this guy is really playing. It's exciting. The crowd's into it, and I'm getting some better images. I'm getting better images with the 85 than I was with the 50 on the Leicas. The lighting was better because it was an overcast day as compared to full sun. But again, you know, exposing for the face, dodging it 2 seconds out of the 12-second exposure, burning the rest of it in. That kind of became the norm. And again, with this image here, now I have switched to the 135. So the 135 has advantages and disadvantages. So first off, it's not an expensive lens. If you think of the Nikon lens system in those old days with these AIS lenses, manual focus AI lenses, there was the 85 1.4, 85 f2. Then there was a 105 2.5, and then eventually they came out with a 105 1.8. Those were legendary. I had a 105 2.5. They were great. Then longer than, and most people had the 105. And then people would jump to the 180. So you had the 105 and the 180. I never liked the 180. I always liked the 135. Now there's a 135 2.8. That's what this one is. That's the one I have. That's the one I've been using. There's also a 135 f2. Now the 135 f2 is sort of similar in size, diameter to the 85 1.4. So you had the 85 1.4 and its sister lens, the 105 1.8, and then the 135 f2, and then the 180. Now you wouldn't want, well, you might want them, but you wouldn't use them. But you wouldn't really want all four, the 85, the 105, the 135, the 180. It's too many lenses. However, if you're in the studio and you just have to walk over to the shelf and pick it up, that's fine. But if you have to carry it with you, trudging through the tundra, like I don't think you're going to want to carry those four lenses. But this 135 2.8, I really like it. It's a little bit smaller. It's a lot lighter. It was cheaper than the 135 f2. Now, it's probably sharper as well, but people love the 135 f2, not taking anything away from it. And people really love their favorite lens is the 105. The 2.5, as I mentioned, I had one. It was great. Or the 1.8. People love the 1.8. I've never had one. People love the 105 1.8. That's kind of like people buy Nikon because of that lens. That's how great that lens is, or was, or is. As I was saying, the 135 2.8. Now, the advantage of the 135 is you can back away a little bit from the stage. You can still get the guitarist and the guitar. And now you've got a narrower angle of view, which means you have better control over the bokeh. No, you've got better control out of the background. It's so much of it is about the background, getting rid of that clutter. So with a 135 and that narrower angle of view, you can get rid of some of the clutter in the background and put the artist up against the black and just live with it. No people back there, no little lights, no rips in the curtain. You have better control of it. So that's the advantage. Now the disadvantage is you've got to back off. So might be people in front of you now. Or in this case, there were beams and wires that held the stage up. So you had a very small window to get the subject against a great background without getting cables and stuff in the foreground. So 135, it was great, but I used the 85 a lot more. The 85 was better. But you get the idea here as the guitarist is playing. There was this white material that you can see on the bottom right-hand corner. I've kind of burned that in a bit, but again, if you cropped a little tighter, cropped a little better, you could kind of keep some of that out. But basic dodge on the face, burn in the corners. Now it needs a crop. And here he is again. Now, as I said, he was a great guitarist and really had the crowd going and was great for photographs. So once again with the 135. Now this picture is a little bit soft. If it's my photo and it's out of focus, we call it soft. If it's your photo and it's out of focus, we call it out of focus. So my shot of this guy's a little bit soft. It's still running at the newspaper. It's just a little bit soft. And there's very shallow depth of field, so the guitar is actually out of focus. So he's soft and the guitar is out of focus. But if it was your shot, it would just be out of focus. I think that's how it works. Again, dodge the face, burn it in. So let's switch it up for a second and go back to another band. Another group comes on, and it's a trio, and they're having a great time, and they are really wailing away on their guitars. Well, this is the bass player. I just want to see what the real situation looked like. And the bass player, they called him Angry Jesus, and he just was having a great time. He was fun. He was interacting with the crowd. He was interacting with me as a photographer. I'm shooting video. I'm shooting stills, and he is just having a great time playing the bass. I loved it. I loved watching him play. Such a great player. Again, a very simple photograph. Dodge the face a little bit. Say it's a 12-setting exposure. I metered it with the spot meter, so the exposures were consistent. You know, I'm at a 500th at 2.8, probably 2.5 maybe, and at a 500 with the Ilford HP5. Focusing now focusing is critical. Now the thing to remember is you're not focusing through the center of the focusing screen. You know, with the split, you're not putting that split on his face, focusing and then recomposing. It isn't going to work that way. You've got to forget the whole spot thing, forget the split screen, and you've got to focus just on the ground glass on his face. That's harder to do. He's bopping around. You're trying to keep the background semi-intelligent, and you've got to focus on the ground glass on his face. There's no time to focus with the split or the center of the focus screen and recompose. You've got to focus where the face is. You don't get to recompose. So that's one thing, and that's difficult to do, and that takes a little bit of practice, and well, have fun doing it. That's what you have to do. So again, dodge the face, burn the corners. Now the lead guitarist and the lead singer, well, this was one of the more dynamic guitar players. Again, give me an idea of the overall scene. This picture, again, needs a crop, but she was exciting to watch. She was really playing, and she was really into it. So we're burning the guitar. We're burning, there's a lot of black. She's wearing black. There's a lot of black going on, but her face, you could lighten up, dodge it just a little. 2 seconds, 3 seconds out of a 12-second exposure. Burn the corners, burn the black, save it with a crop. Off you go. Now this picture, you can pretend all you want that you're satisfied with the cropping on the guitar. That's just the way it happened. I mean, there's a little bit more on the negative, but I wish I had the whole guitar. If she was holding it more vertical, maybe I'd have had it, but it might have been there an instant earlier. Anyways, would have been nice to have the whole guitar, but she's really playing and she's really into it. Again, slight dodge on the face, burn the corners. And this final image, again, it's a vertical shot with the 85 1.4. I'm at about 2.8, focusing not with the center focus, not with the split. I'm focusing just on the ground glass where her face is, focusing on her eyes. It's easier when they don't have glasses on, but you're focusing on her eyes, on the ground glass, shooting it as you can. And she's bopping around, so it's difficult to get the background right, get the guitar in, get it all to work. She's got long hair that's kind of in her face. You needed to get that you know, you need the luck out there as well. So when you've got those I've got nothing to shoot blues, why not go to a jazz or music festival? Hey, I'm not talking Taylor Swift. I'm not talking about getting press accreditation. I'm talking about a little regional music festival where you can walk right up to the stage. People are standing next to you with phones, taking pictures. You can shoot some film, experiment, use different f-stops, switch lenses, you know, try something a little longer, try something a little tighter, try something a little looser, see, you know, try to work the situation, have fun. It's for the joy of photography. And that's what you're trying to do is put yourself in a situation where you can have fun, make some great photos. Now you're going to spend some time in the darkroom. Now you've got something to print. Now you've got something to look at. Now you've got something to improve on. A lot of mistakes. The more mistakes that you can make, the better off you are. I don't know if that's exactly right, but if you can make some mistakes and learn from them, you're going to be further ahead. So next time I go to a concert, I'm going to use these skills that I've learned and do a better job. Now, what would I do for sure? I thought that using the spot meter was great. Using the spot meter gave me amazingly consistent exposure on the negatives. So that was good. Now the SLRs were better than the rangefinders for me. Maybe if I had a 90 for the Leica, then you would have had a little more reach, so that might have been better than just being stuck with the 50. But with the Leica, you've got to focus at the center where the rangefinder patch is and recompose. That's hard to do. With the Nikon, you can frame it and then just focus on the ground glass, which is tough to do as well, but at least you don't have to recompose it when people are bopping around. So I think it's easier with the SLR than it was with the rangefinders, but it would be a good experiment to try again. And now that I know a bit more. Other things I would want to do, I wouldn't mind shooting more with the 135 as long as you could get a clean shot without a pole or wire or cable or something in your face. You know, what am I going to do with these photos? Well, nothing. I'm just having fun, joy of photography. Maybe I'll print up some better fiber-based prints of a couple of them and mail them to the musicians. Maybe I'll do that. Can't see any advantage. There's no advantage for me to do that, except I have to print them in the darkroom. That's great. But yeah, maybe I'll do that down the road one day, mail them to them. It's really just to have fun. Listen to some great bands, listen to some great music, get out of the blues, go take some photos, enjoy your equipment. The best thing about equipment is using it. The joy of using it. The user experience. The Nikon F3, so that's what I use this time. Any SLR would have done the same job probably. Just wouldn't have had as great a user experience because the Nikon F3 has a great user experience. You fire the shutter, you wind it, it's mechanical joy. Other cameras are too though. The Olympus OM4 Ti, that's a nice camera. The Canon F1, the new F1, that's 30 years old. That's a nice camera. There's a lot of great cameras out there that when you fire the shutter and you wind them, it's a great user experience. But the F3, I think is probably one of the best. Have some fun, shoot some blues, shoot some jazz, maybe send them a print. And hey, who knows, maybe Taylor Swift will call you up. She didn't call me though.